Good evening, Council. Before I start, I want to let you know that all the pictures you'll be seeing were taken in our local area tonight. In public and appellant testimony, we have demonstrated that the best laid plans don't work out in extreme fire events. After much research, the United States Geological Survey fire scientist C.J. Fotheringham concurs, and I quote, "There's really two types of fires, the ones we plan for and the ones that do the damage," end quote. The Madrona documents, however, assert that only 8 houses suffered damage during the freeway complex fire, as proof that the Brea firefighting response was adequate. But that documentation is simply wrong. Actual contact with impacted residents tells another story. 3 houses were lost. 31 properties were damaged. I hope you can understand why we don't trust that Brea is prepared to take on another 162 homes in a very fire-prone area. In response to the inclusion of sprinklers in the homes, we agree that they indeed may help, even though it gives residents the unpleasant option of having water or fire damage. What they don't explain to you is that the system must be actively turned off. Who's going to do that? What is the impact on water availability if multiple houses deploy sprinklers? What they also don't explain is that the most frequent cause of sprinkler failure is that fire hoses have diminished the residential water pressure. Doug Strickland, an Olinda Village resident who you heard last time, who stayed behind to fight the freeway complex fire, found out firsthand that the existing homes in the village had very little water pressure, so they relied on pool pumps. Apparently, loss of water pressure from sprinkler deployment is enough of a concern that FEMA has a fact sheet on it. FEMA recommends that people who live in wildfire zones should consider adding a pressurized holding tank, even if they are hooked up to the municipal water supply. Next, we can see a lot of effort has gone into trying to protect the homes with the extensive fuel modification zones, which even extend into neighboring properties. But those fuel modification zones do not change the fact that the project itself is surrounded by wildland over which Madrona has no control. To the west is Era and Chino Hill State Park. To the north is the Firestone Boy Scout Reservation. To the east is the Hill of Hope, and to the south are steep, privately owned slopes and more parkland. The Fire Protection Plan states that the emergency exit through Olinda Village must also be protected with the additional 20-foot clearance on both sides. That is simply not going to happen. Madrona has no control over the brush there. State Parks has previously stated that, quote, "Fuel clearance within Chino Hill State Park is contrary to department policy and cannot be supported," end quote. Ignoring this fact does not make it go away and pokes another hole in Madrona's fire protection plan. In addition, once Madrona residents make their way to Carbon Canyon Road using their primary exit, they face the steepest portion of Carbon Canyon, a place where flames can easily jump the road, as they did in the freeway complex fire. While focusing on protecting homes, the fire management plan does not put any thought into protecting firefighters, in that there is no planned fire safety zone. A fire safety zone is a place that firefighters retreat to in the event that they are overwhelmed by flames. There are other brush clearance issues with Madrona that are more subtle but very revealing. In the USGS DVD Living with Fire, C.J. Fotheringham states, and I quote, "My research shows that the most important factor in whether a house burns is the tree canopy overlap of the roof, and the reason for this is not because the tree catches fire and then catches the house on fire, but rather it's the litter that falls into the gutters on the roof next to the house that ignites and then catches the house on fire," end quote. As seen in these architectural renderings from the project documents, lovely trees surround the homes and dot the neighborhoods to make it seem like a wonderful place to live. In fire country, we call those trees ladder fuels, where the flames climb up the trees and spread the fire. Look at all of the ladder fuels depicted. Clearly, Madrona either wants to fool you with pretty pictures, or they still don't understand the importance of fuel modifications near homes, not just on the buffer slopes. I would next like to discuss their oft-repeated statements that, quote, no home was damaged or destroyed in the freeway complex fire that was constructed after 1996, end quote. Sadly, this did not hold true for the 2003 Cedar Fire or the 2007 Witch Fire in San Diego. According to calculations from the Institute of Business and Home Safety, a total of 64 newer homes were burned in those fires. Those homes were built adhering to 2001 and 2004 construction standards. Nevertheless, Madrona and OCFA touted the survival of Casino Ridge, homes that were in Yorba Linda during the freeway complex fire. I quote, firefighters stated they were able to focus their resources and efforts on other areas as the community was developed to withstand wildfire with little firefighting intervention, end quote. The thing is, the fire authority didn't tell the residents that they were basically relinquishing this traditional public responsibility and turning it over to the residents. Here's the photo found in the after-action report of the freeway complex fire and also found in Madrona's own slide presentation. Here's roughly the same area a little bit later as the flames got really close. You can see a man in the picture in a yellow protective suit. He is unloading a pool pump and fire hoses from his truck. His name is Chuck Cheek. Here's an email from Casino Ridge resident Barry McKinley, and I quote from the letter. Chuck Cheek was my next-door neighbor until they moved. Chuck and I and one other neighbor used a hose pump from the pool to fight the fire, as well as house hoses. The two houses at the end of our street, Saddle Ridge, were both rentals, and the people left. They probably would have gone up in flames if we had not been there with hoses, constantly fighting back the fire. There was also lawn furniture that was on fire, as well as doormats, etc. at all homes. I believe my house, Chuck's, and the two end houses, which were all within 10 to 30 feet of the fire passing, would have caught on fire if Chuck and I and the other neighbor were not there to put out all of the little fires. We were there doing that until 9 to 10 that night. Both my canary palms in the front were on fire from the time the fire started off and on until Monday. The first fire truck I saw in our area was from San Francisco, sometime Sunday night. P.S. Don't fight a fire wearing a tank top, shorts, and flip-flops. Flip-flops melted, flying embers burned the skin, as well as bees being very upset. I must have gotten stung half a dozen times, end quote. Surely you can see the danger of leaving the untrained in charge of firefighting. You can also understand their resentment toward the firefighting agency. Residents paid for a service that, according to the after-action report, the fire agency had little intention of providing because of their unwavering faith in building codes. Here's what another Casino Ridge resident thought of OCFA's absence. And I quote, because I'm a firefighter's daughter, so I would never say this on my own. It's truly a quote. In my personal opinion, the reason the houses on Casino Ridge were spared from the fire had nothing to do with the worthless response of the local fire departments. The worthless fire department never even showed up to the Casino Ridge area until 9 p.m. That was a good 2 to 3 hours after the main fire fronts came through, end quote. He goes on to say, and I quote, with the growth of landscaping in and around some of the homes over the last 5 years, the same fire today could take out some homes if these homeowners do not cut back this landscaping, end quote. This same resident has said in an email that he will never leave again, and he now has his own firefighting equipment. According to the fire protection plan, Madrona will be treated like Casino Ridge. The plan states, and I quote, these measures will allow the community to be defended with a minimal amount of resources, end quote. It behooves you to tell the Madrona residents before their first fire comes that they will more or less be on their own. At the January meeting, we distributed a compilation of accounts from local residents who experienced the freeway complex fire up close and personal. Their efforts directly saved many homes in the absence of firefighters. We have shared these real-life experiences which reveal the superficiality of official reports. Documents don't tell the whole story. On another subject, to their credit, the Fire Protection Plan acknowledges the danger of convective heat, i.e. heated air masses. The plan states, and I quote, "The above mitigations only account for direct flame impingement. For example, a fire starting on Carbon Canyon Road in the area of the North Access Road in a drainage that is in alignment with the wind would cause the arrival of heated gases in a plume in front of the head of the fire that could be very strong and unpredictable. This is a very dangerous condition for people that may be in the area when this occurs," end quote. They even identify 64 lots, 40% of the Madrona project, which are at risk due to unmitigatable convective heat. We believe this is as clear a disclaimer as you will get from a consultant desiring future business with cities and developers. The Madrona team also reiterated at a previous council meeting that, quote, "The next fire is coming, there's no doubt about it," end quote. So consider yourselves warned. In the same DVD mentioned earlier, USGS research ecologist Alexandra Seifert, who studied 6,000 homes destroyed or damaged by wildfires since 2001, states, and I quote, "What we are finding is that location is the most significant factor, and the most dangerous locations are those along ridgetops, in wind corridors, as well as when the homes are scattered in isolated clusters of development," end quote. Does that sound familiar? Isn't it just a tad disquieting to grasp that all of these extra mitigation measures are required to make it safer to build Madrona? 3 fuel modification zones, enhanced construction zones, no venting on sites facing fuel modification, radiant heat walls, and fire sprinklers. To ensure protection of life and property, Madrona's fire plan, mitigation measures, and theoretical behaviors of fire and human beings must work perfectly. This perfection did not happen during the freeway complex fire. And given our new normal with drought and ever-increasing building in wildland areas, there's no guarantee that this perfection will ever happen. The planners themselves have warned you of the dangers of convective heat, and they have admitted that it is not mitigatable. Fort Madrona cannot be defended. There is no radiant heat wall or fuel modification zone available that can defy the laws of convective heat. No one can promise a fireproof house, and frankly, fire resistant just isn't good enough for those unwitting future residents of Brea who will be living in a fortress with a fuel modification moat surrounded by the wildland-urban interface that has burned before and will burn again. Knowing these obvious, life-threatening risks, can you in good conscience put future Brea residents in this position? John Keeley of USGS, a fire scientist, states, and I quote, "We are losing homes in fires because homes are being put into hazardous conditions. The important thing is not to blame it on the fire, but instead to think about better planning and putting people at risk." So please, say yes to the appeal and no to Madrona, because inevitable firestorms and the resulting damages are out of your control, no matter how many mitigation measures you adopt. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it over to Bev to wrap it up.